Invention comes to me just in the course of the day. There'll be different times that I'll hear somebody say something and I think, oh, that's a great idea for a paper. I should, write that paper. And so that comes to me pretty easily.
I think I have an odd way of approaching writing. Like I have an article now that I need to write, and I will spend a lot of time just thinking about it. Before I ever put, well, I guess it's not pencil to paper anymore. It's like sitting at the keyboard to write. But before I put pencil to paper, I will sit and think and think and think. And often what I'm doing in my mind is just thinking through the structure of the paper that I'm trying to write.
Probably the initial ideas and just getting started is the hardest part for me. Once I have an idea for a podcast, I can usually sit down and it pretty well flows. I can get it going.
Often my best ideas come that hour, like right before you go to sleep and you're laying in bed. So I'll frequently text message myself because I don't want to turn on the light because it's really bright. So I'll text message myself random ideas that I have, or I'll write them on my arm, usually in the dark. So I end up with these like half scribbled sort of notes, and that's how I start brainstorming an idea. And then once I decide what I want to do, I'll research for a day and find all the different articles that I want to use, and then I'll go through and read a few of those each day while I'm researching and preparing.
I tend to do a lot of reading and a lot of kind of thinking about the paper, but there's just something about physically sitting down and writing that first sentence that it's a bit intimidating for me, I think, because I know I'm going to have to physically put some time into it. And I mean, I tend to have a short attention span, and I'm pretty wired and energetic, so like it takes a lot for me to focus and actually write out the paper. But once I get started, it's not so intimidating anymore, and it's a pretty quick process.
First, I come up with some idea, usually not a real specific direction that I'm going, and I begin the research. And I really feel like research is the primary place where I can begin and where everything begins to unfold.
I think whenever I have to write something, I always try to go to an environment that's going to inspire me. And so I love going to coffee houses, or I love going to an environment where jazz music is playing in the background, or classical music. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll just sit in that environment and just dwell in that environment for the longest time, and just watch people in that environment and write about things that I'm watching.
Yeah, another thing I struggle with when I write is I have the hardest time just sitting down at the computer and doing it. I sometimes have a tendency to put my writing assignments off, but if I just make myself sit down at the computer and I start writing, it's never as bad as I thought it was going to be, or it's never as hard as I thought it was going to be before I started. The biggest hurdle for me to get over is just sitting down and writing.
Yeah, I think most of my pre-writing is in my head. I think things through a lot, and I think about the way I want to phrase things and the points I want to make. So actually, writing for me is, I guess I'm engaged in the process for months before I actually sit down and write.
It changes from writing about personal things or writing about whatever's on my mind to it's more focused. And then I start just in my journal writing some ideas that inspire me for the paper or for the project. And so I'll just start making a list of those topics.
I'm one of those procrastinators who has a really hard time sitting down and actually getting it on paper, and so I spend a lot of time thinking about it, planning it out, outlining it, working through it, but actually sitting down and beginning the typing process is difficult.
But when I was an undergrad, I kind of started this way of writing where if I had a large assignment, I would just put all of my words on the page. I would just kind of like throw all my ideas onto the page, what I wanted to make sure I talked about, what I wanted to make sure I covered, and I didn't worry about grammar. I kind of free wrote. I kind of wrote down everything I wanted to cover.
when it's more of a sustained project over a longer period of time, I'll do a lot of reading and trying to become knowledgeable of whatever the topic is, because I find that just the more I read, the more I have to think about and to address. So I don't necessarily create a real rigid outline and then stick by that. Occasionally I will if my points start getting mixed up in my mind, but for me it's usually I get a bunch of books over the subject that I'm writing, I read a whole lot, may take a few notes, and then I just go right at it and I start drafting, and kind of the paper builds through that process.
Until I've done really thorough research, there's not any point in doing the writing. A lot of things are going through my mind as I do the research. And then when I'm ready to begin the writing process, I usually start by talking to someone, telling them what I've seen, bouncing ideas back and forth, coming up with a specific direction that I want to go, and then making an outline.
And I think if I'm very careful in terms of what goes on in the pre-writing, I'll definitely have something successful at the very end. But I think the pre-writing is extremely essential in terms of how everything's going to turn out.